All right, let's see here. I'm gonna go ahead and copy the live stream link here. So if you're just tuning in on the replay, I have not posted this yet, so we'll give this a minute. Hey, can you hear me now, Jax? Sorry about that. So I just realized that I've been talking without audio. So if you're watching the replay, about 3 minutes in, should be fixed. Okay, how about now? Yeah, awesome. All good. So guys, go ahead and drop your questions in the general channel. Please respond to the thread where I posted the link. I probably will get some questions here on the YouTube chat too, but just the official place to do it is in the Slack channel, but it's not a huge deal. So if you're just rolling in, what I was talking about while I was on mute is we're starting a new tutorial next week on Dapp University. So we're going to build as a DeFi project. So if you're familiar with Uniswap Exchange, where you can basically just swap tokens instantly, that's kind of what we're going to build. So I actually finished most of it today, so it looks pretty cool. I'll put you guys show you guys a screenshot and see here. I'll put it in that thread. See here, recents. My screenshots kind of got lost in my Mac here. But I'll go ahead and put that in the chat. If you guys have questions, go ahead and leave them in that thread. I'll get to answer them. Also got a question here about freelancing. I'll jump on that here in 1 second. I just want to post this screenshot while I'm still thinking about it. Let's see here. Yeah, so look at that comment thread. I just uploaded the screenshot. Okay, so Robert has a question, great question about freelancing. So Jack says he's got to go. No worries. If you have to go, you can drop some questions. I'll be happy to answer them here, and you can just watch the response later. So Robert says, can you give us some generic examples of freelance blockchain projects I have done? Maybe some examples of simple ones and some complex ones. What kind of projects could we expect? That's a great question, Robert. So for me, I've worked on a pretty broad range of blockchain projects, kind of ranging from the financial space to more kind of what I call experimental uses of blockchain technology, like in the accounting space and things like that, somewhat related to finance, but not in the same way, not necessarily dealing with cryptocurrencies. So I'll answer your question here, the simple versions. So a lot of people want to build projects with cryptocurrency. That I get asked to do because I deal a lot with Ethereum or some sort of financial transactions. So a lot of people want to build tokens. And sometimes people just want a token. They just want a token put on the network they can use as a starting point for their project. I would say that that's something that if you learn to do, a lot of people kind of more on the beginner end of things could deliver that for someone, especially if it was a really straightforward ERC20 token that just needed some sort of customization. Now, more advanced tokens get more complex. So I'm actually in the middle of building a token right now that has a complex voting mechanism. So basically, like, if you think about most tokens, whenever they're created, they have like a fixed total supply. So if you create a token for somebody, it's just got like, maybe 1 million tokens in existence, right? Or maybe 10 million, 100 million, whatever it is. And that amount doesn't necessarily change. And you can just send those around, hold them in wallets. But a more complex token actually has it has like an issuance schedule where only a certain amount of tokens are allowed to be issued over time. So if the supply starts at 0 and increases potentially like every month or some interval that you define, right? And part of this token's issuance schedule is that people who hold tokens actually vote on the amount of tokens that get issued over time. So they actually have influence over that. So that's an example of something that's like much more complex that would probably take you some time to learn how to do, but you could theoretically do if you were more of a beginner, if you got good. So moving beyond that though, so those are like on the simpler end. Sometimes people just want that. Also on the simpler end are more just like prototype projects. So for example, like somebody says, hey, I have this idea for a smart contract that does blank, and I just want to see if it works. They'll say, we want to use smart contracts to like, let's see, like, I did a project for somebody who just said their e-commerce store, they wanted to have a non-fungible token that represented the product that they sold. Okay. Like, so for example, the Blockchain Mastery University website uses a non-fungible token or an NFT. After we sell, we represent that. Okay. So that's, relatively straightforward thing to do as a developer. ERC 721 is somewhat of a solved problem. You just kind of have to customize it from there. And then all they really wanted to do is have a user interface where they could issue these tokens and track them. Okay. So basically it was literally just a set of smart contracts deployed to the network, to their customizations. You could use a library like OpenZeppelin to do that. And then a user interface, which was just built in React, pretty much just like I show you how to do inside the bootcamp, and also to some extent the tutorials that I show you on my channel. And all I did was issue tokens for people. Basically, you just put in the address of the person you want to send it to, put in any metadata that you want to assign to that non-fungible token, and you just send it. And you can track to see the tokens that have been created. You could get more advanced at that and do some analytics, but that was all the basic functionality they need. And that was a pretty fast turnaround project, something I would do in less than a week, kind of just in and out sort of deal. More complex projects are like multi-month projects. So an example of something like that would be, I don't know if Jan's on this call tonight, but we're actually talking about a project like this. He might be in the chat, but basically he has an idea for I don't want to say too much necessarily, because I don't know, we haven't discussed everything yet. I don't know what he wants to share and what not to share, but basically the whole idea is representing things that can be invested in the physical world. I'm purposefully obscuring what the information is in case he doesn't want to share that information. And allowing people to purchase representations of that on the blockchain. So basically, that's a much more complex project because it's like an entire commercial application, commercial user-facing application where you just have to be able to go. They have to go there. They can purchase representations of these assets with actual like fiat currencies, and they get they get the equity represented by the blockchain. They have accounts. There's lots of edge cases and security things you have to think about. You have to be able to. It's also a crowdsourced thing. So you can submit your assets for other people to invest in. So there's another side of that, which is, it's a platform. So users can get on there and list their assets. And then on the other side, other users can come and try to invest in that. So that's an example of a really big multi-month, maybe even multi-year, very high budget project that's pretty complex, and it takes a long time, and that's not a job for one developer to do. That's like a small team of developers, or even a large team, but we're going to do it with a small team. So I hope that helps answer your question. Let's see if there's anything else in there, Robert. Samples of freelance blockchain projects I've done, some simple ones, some complex ones. Yeah, okay, so what kind of project could you expect? That's a good question. So it depends on what your experience level is. There's so much out there, right? Part of it's just finding out like what the demand is. If you're a beginner, I could say you could probably do some kind of token project pretty easily. I would advise that you get it audited if you are working with a client and this is one of your first projects. So I mean, people ask me all the time, like, can you just create a token for me? I want a token. So that's probably one of the most common things people ask me to do for them. So judging by the demand from the market, I would think that you could find people who are also looking for that. And you could probably implement that pretty easily as a relatively new developer. Actually, I'm not sure what your experience is necessarily, so I don't want to assume that you're a beginner. So Robert says, I'm working through the ERC20 tutorial. Is there a reason you set the total supply by passing the value in through the migration versus setting a hard value in the contracts constructor function? You could do either. So, I mean, you could also assign it directly to the state variable without doing it in the constructor. It doesn't really matter. I mean, people can go see the token on Etherscan and know what the total supply is. They're going to be able to see what the total supply is. Yeah, it doesn't really matter. So I hope that helps, Robert. So he says he's a beginner with Solidity. Yeah, that's okay. So yeah, I think as a beginner, learning how to build tokens would be a great start. There's a lot of demand for that kind of thing. All right, let's see here. Any more questions? Any guidance on how much clients are willing to pay for simple token projects? That's a good question. It depends on what the client, like who the client actually is. So there are a lot of people who want tokens to start businesses. Like a lot of people want to do it as a fundraising project. And there's a lot of people who are in that camp who like literally don't have any money. I mean, that's why they're creating a token in the first place. So I get lots of requests for that kind of thing where people just like want to pay you a few $100s to create a token. If that was worth your time to do it, you could certainly do that. I wouldn't expect, I would never do that. And I wouldn't necessarily advise most people to do that. That's typically going to probably be working with a very hard to deal with client. But if you're a total beginner and you want to build a token for a few $100s, you could do that as a resume thing. There's some people who want, just to build tokens and their budget's like a few $1,000s. That still wouldn't even trip my threshold for a project. But as a beginner, I think a lot of people who are willing to, a few $1,000 to get a resume piece in for somebody who's brand new, I could see that being worth it for a lot of people. So, it just depends on what you're willing to work for. And also where you live, what your cost of living is, what your financial needs are. It also depends on now versus, like 2.5 years ago. Okay, so Kevin says, on average, does a typical project require more development on the front end compared to creating and testing smart contracts? It's a good question, Kevin. Not necessarily. So it depends on what the project is. In general, I'm going to give a hard and fast answer here. I'll put it this way. The way that I like to build blockchain projects is to do use the blockchain, honestly, as little as possible for lots of reasons. The gas costs are high when you're using Ethereum. Like the more code you're putting inside of a smart contract, the more you usually have to pay. It's the least, honestly, computationally sophisticated part of the stack. So I try to use that the least. It's the slowest part of the stack generally. Try to use that the least. So I try to do as few things on the blockchain as possible. Now, that being said, that doesn't mean the smart contracts are not an incredibly important part of the project. So for example, like I try to keep the smart contracts very dumb, so to speak. So like instead of trying to like always, I try to put as little logic in the functions as required. So instead of having like some nice methods with syntactic sugar on it that like do all this magic and like pull out this information from the blockchain, you typically just want them to be as dumb as possible. So like literally just have it do exactly what you're saying. So for example, like if you see in some of the tutorials where it's like you have a mapping that says, fetch this particular item out of this mapping. So like kind of like a database lookup where you say, give me, say an election, for example, give me candidate number 1, like you just fetch them out one by one rather than trying to like fetch them all out, stuff like that. So I try to keep the smart contracts dumb, so to speak, a smooth user experience for user-facing projects. That being said, also, maybe there's a question behind what you're asking, which is having other development skills outside of just doing the smart contracts for a lot of people is valuable. It depends on what you want to specialize in. You don't necessarily have to do a lot of that work. I mean, there are lots of projects that are very blockchain heavy that need a smart contract specialist to just focus on that part of the entire ecosystem. So you could definitely work in something like that where you don't have to like write all this other software. But I think definitely having some full stack skills makes you more versatile as a blockchain developer. So let's see here. So about component wheel mount, my browser complains it is deprecated. So can we use component did mount? I just tried to rename but ran into issues. So that's a good question, Martin. So part of this is like the React lifecycle methods. Um, some of those need to be updated. So like there's lots of different ways of doing that kind of thing in React. There's like React hooks. That's kind of always changing. My question is, does your browser actually break or does it just say it's deprecated? Because deprecation is not necessarily like the worst thing in the world. Really is if it breaks, that's the real problem. Okay, so let's see here. So also in your question, I don't think that component did mount is the proper method. So what are some things you would do to a resume if you wanted to put it on the blockchain? It's a great question, Brandon. So let me try to clarify what you're asking. Are you saying you would like to store a resume on the blockchain, or you want to create a resume and put blockchain information on it? Oh, create a resume with some things we are learning. Oh, wait. Also, for the clarify your question, you mean to create a blockchain representation of a resume? Is that what you're asking? Okay, awesome, perfect. Yeah, it's a good question. So let's see here. If you're going to create a blockchain representation of a resume, so do you want a way to store multiple resumes, or just like one person's resume? Just one? Okay. So essentially, what you could do is your individual resume could be a smart contract. Um, so essentially, you would create a smart contract. You could, use state variables. Yeah, yeah, perfect. Okay. So you could use state variables for the basic smart contract attributes like your name, your contact information, your trying to think of basic, like your phone number, maybe your email address. And then what you could do is if you had multiple listings of items, you could essentially have an array, and you could use structs. Like let's say you had a job history. You could use a struct, which is how Solidity allows you to define your own data structures. So let's say you had like your work history, for example. So job 1, job 2, job 3. For job 1, you could basically, or for a job in general, you could create a struct called job. You could have a field like company, field like title, and a field like start date and end date, something like that. Each job would have those, and then you could store each of those inside of our jobs array or a work history array, something like that. Basically, you could just do that inside the constructor function. So whenever the smart contracts are deployed to the network, you have a function called constructor that gets executed. And inside of that, you could just say work history. Push is the method for arrays in Solidity that adds new elements. And you could, create a new struct that had all the job information for job 1, and you would do that again for job 2 and again for job 3. And once you deploy that to the network, you'd be able to read all that information. You'd be able to read your, title, your name, any state variables that you stored that are public, and then also your work history. You'd be able to fetch all those out. Now, just like I was saying a minute ago, you had to fetch all those out individually. So if you wanted to keep track of how many jobs you had, you could keep a count of those, and then you would go through and fetch each one out individually. Or in the sense of an array, actually, you could just do it with a function. So I hope that helps, Brandon. If there's more to that question, I'd be happy to help. Okay, great, Martin. All right, so Robert says, for freelance Web3 projects, how often do they include designing a nice looking front-end website? The reason I ask, because I'm confident about learning the coding for the backend Web3 interaction with the blockchain, but designing websites that look aesthetically good is not really a talent I have. Yeah, that's okay, Robert. So here's the thing. This is where you kind of have to negotiate with clients a little bit. At least I have to. So a lot of times clients have this great vision of what they want, and less experienced clients will go and just say, I need a developer to do this, like one developer, right? So if they come to you and they say, you're the one developer to accomplish this entire project, and it needs to have a front-end interface and a back-end interface. Sorry, a back-end, like with smart contracts or something like that. And you're not that aesthetically skilled, I'll say. Then basically, like, they have to hire somebody else to do the front end, which you could always hire someone else to do that and work with you. You can make a profit off that and then have somebody else do it. Or you could just not get involved and say, I'm going to make this much per hour and this person's going to make this much per hour. And you all work together and they both deal with the client. So that's okay if you don't do the interface. You could hire a designer or UI interface designer to sketch it out and say, this is what it's going to look like. And then you as a developer could just turn that into an actual interface. Another thing is, like, it depends on what the client's actually going for. Sometimes clients just want to see that their idea works, and they want to get people to try to use it. And this is where I will often like kind of challenge clients a little bit. Like, sometimes you can't always, sometimes they're not going to get necessarily just what they ask for. If they're trying to do an MVP, right, for a minimum viable product, like, sometimes you don't need like this crazy awesome design. It just has to be good enough. So a lot of times people won't use new projects because either they don't have enough traffic, they don't have enough eyeballs on it. And if they do have enough traffic, like, it doesn't actually provide them with anything valuable, so they don't use it. And that honestly has hardly anything to do with the design. You'd be surprised. There's a lot of projects that were very useful to people that did not have amazing designs that people use quite a bit. And conversely, things with amazing designs with no traffic and no use case, and people don't use them. So for you, I would say try to determine what your client actually needs. If it's just a basic prototype that they're just going to use and show off to an investor or something like that, you might be able to just design it yourself and do the front end implementation. If it's more serious than that and they're willing to hire a second interface designer or front end developer, you can also do that. Just work with them. So you could, like I said earlier, you could have them just be responsible for that part of the project and they work with the client directly, or you could manage that person and, either take a profit or not take a profit, depending on what you want to do. I would recommend taking a profit if you're spending time managing that person. Or you could just bill that for your own hours if you're doing an hourly rate or something like that. So hope that helps, Robert. And for the record, I'm not a good interface designer either, but I've managed to do just fine. So Luis just got here. I don't think you've missed too much of the good stuff. We've been talking about freelancing quite a bit. We're talking about implementing some things on the blockchain. Had some questions about my work history. Had an announcement that I've got a new tutorial dropping next week, which I just started working on today. So it's going to be a DeFi project. Basically, we're going to build something like Uniswap where you can instantly trade tokens. So some flash loans. Yeah. Let's see here. We got any more questions? I think Martin might be typing another question here. Got some stuff going on over here in the YouTube chat. Let's see. Robert, Jax, James. Oh, hello, James. Okay, so how does Dev work on blockchain development for mobile apps? Fi, Argent, or MetaMask? Oh, how does a developer work on blockchain development for mobile apps? So, Martin, let me maybe clarify your question. So you're asking, how do you get a like a blockchain website to work on a mobile wallet like Argent or MetaMask? Is that what you're asking? I'm just going to assume that's what you're asking. If it's not, please correct me. But basically, so I don't know if you guys know Trust Wallet. So Victor was the guy who started that, and what he told me to do when I learned from him a long time ago was basically to optimize your web apps for MetaMask, and most of the mobile wallets are following that as sort of their rule of thumb. That might change a little bit over time. I know that the browsers kind of change in how they implement Ethereum providers. But that was his suggestion, and that's what I've always done, which is basically try to get to work from MetaMask on desktop first, and then observe the behavior on mobile and kind of tweak as needed from there. And also, here's a little bit of advice. If you are doing freelancing, most people, I get this question a lot from clients that say like, hey, I want to build a mobile app for my project as well, or maybe only, right? So it depends on who the client is. Like most clients who are just starting their businesses and have limited capital, who want to build dApps that have mobile like capability, I almost always push them towards building a web application that can be accessed with a mobile browser, like Trust Wallet or something like that. Or Martin's talking about Argent or MetaMask Mobile. There's lots of reasons. They've solved a lot of problems already. You don't have, and if you build a mobile app, you basically have to rebuild a lot of the mobile handling of like private keys and stuff like that. So basically like MetaMask, when you're signing transactions, stores your private key, manages the signatures and all that kind of stuff. So if you build a mobile wallet, if you build a mobile app, in a lot of ways, you have to sort of reinvent that wheel inside the mobile app itself, and to handle the user's private keys, and sometimes that's not really desirable. It's a lot of extra work, and honestly, client dollars are typically better spent on building out the app itself and not reinventing that wheel, because their bigger priority is to gain traction and get users. And if they wanted to build a mobile app, they should just do it later. That's my opinion for most people. Not everybody, but for most people. Okay, all right. So Luis says he's got an interview coming up and look to question the jobs channel. So sorry, Luis, if I haven't gotten back to that. I'm just signing on for today. I'm going to go and do a roundup of answering questions after I get off the stream tonight. Let's see here. But basically, he is contributing to the company's community forum and GitHub. That's actually a really great way to get attention. I would highly recommend other people follow Luis's lead on that. If you're trying to get some attention and maybe get hired, that's a really great way to get noticed. So how should I let them know I'll be interviewing without sounding like I'm asking for a favor or recommendation? That's a good question. So it sounds like you've been interacting with their developers, but you went through a completely different process to apply for the job. Is that right, Luis? I'm going to assume that's right. If that's wrong, just let me know. So at this point, I don't think it's a big deal. Like I wouldn't overthink this. Like I don't think you're going to alienate everyone that you develop relationships with by just telling them, "Hey, I applied." Do you have? I would ask for like, do you have any advice for me or something like that? That would be a way for them to, potentially. Then the ball's in their court, and they can, go. They can go with that however they feel. Okay, so you applied on the website and email contact with other HR, but talking to community managers and devs on GitHub. Okay, so yeah, it sounds like you're kind of split here. You've been talking to this set of people, but you applied with this set of people, and they haven't necessarily communicated. So what I would say is for this set of people, the community managers, et cetera, you've been interacting with, I wouldn't necessarily think you're going to like alienate them by just saying, "Hey, I applied. Do you have any advice for me?" Because when that does is that opens a door for them to potentially say, "Oh yeah, here's some advice," and then it opens the door for them to go above and beyond and say, "Oh, I'll talk to the hiring manager. I'll talk to this person. Let them know that you're skilled, that you've helped us." And that's a way that you can sort of ask for that indirectly. And if they don't offer that, they didn't offer it. Maybe you can talk to somebody else who might offer it if you ask in a similar way. So the best case scenario here, let's just say this particular opportunity doesn't work out and you find yourself in another similar situation. But this is great what you're doing, by the way. This is awesome. But what you could do even a little better is like go through the people who already have interacted with you and see like if they're able to kind of open up that door for a job. That's the best situation, because then it's like going to a party where you don't know anybody. It's a lot harder to get to know people if you're introducing yourself. It's a lot easier if you go and someone else introduces you to everyone else and you already have common friends. It's just way easier, and you're probably going to have more friends by the end of the night. I'll put it that way. So that's kind of a similar situation. Okay, so let's see here. Is there a blockchain solution for airline ticketing? That's a good question. I feel like I have actually seen some information about airline tickets on blockchain. Let's see here. Let's say like Delta, for example. Let's see here. I have had a couple of things pop up about people using blockchain in the airline industry, but it wasn't directly regarded to ticketing. But I can see ticketing being a good use case, especially if there's a way that it talks to multiple airlines, because there's already a financial transaction happening. they're purchasing something. So you could debit the transaction fee out of that. And it would be able to, you know, exist in a public blockchain in a trustless way that neither airline had to control. I think the challenge with ticketing is going to be proving the identity of the owner. But I guess you could also prove the identity if you had some sort of, as long as you had the private key, right? Why does it matter? You have a ticket and you have an ID. But by the same time, the ticket also has to have the ID of the person on it. That's a great question. Great thing to think about. All right, let's see here. So Brandon says, working on a project for digital artists to upload their work and sell. Would I use IPFS to upload to the blockchain and smart contracts to sell, purchase? Upload their, so digital artists, choose upload. So what you would do is, if they have digital artwork, the actual file, sure, that could be stored on IPFS. And how IPFS works is you put a file on it and it gives you a hash. And that hash represents the location of the file on IPFS. It's kind of like an ID, like a really big, unique ID. And basically, you could take that hash or that ID and store that on the blockchain inside a smart contract. And then, you could use a smart contract to buy or sell that particular piece of artwork. So you could look at like the marketplace tutorial that I did on my YouTube channel and also my website to get an idea of how that would work. And then you could sort of mash that up with, like the IPFS tutorials that I've done, for example. Take both of those and sort of breed them. So Martin says, great Q&A. Thank you, Martin. Oh yeah, beta.sent is an app. I had the Sent guys on my channel about a year ago. So about the flash loans. What do you want to know about the flash loans, Brandon? So when will we be moving to the mainnet for the university NFT? That's a good question, Luis. So that's the subject of this week's video for Blockchain Mastery University. I'm going to be moving the NFT to the main network, and I'm also going to be talking about, strategies for how to deploy smart contracts to the main network and sort of different ways to do that and how you can handle it. So that will be very soon. So I probably will do the same kind of thing I did last time, where I issue that token, give people a little while to make sure they can actually use it. And then once we verify that, I'll switch the website over to work off of mainnet, because right now it's just working off of Kovan. So Jax says needs a creative smart contract. So is that a question, or was that part of this thread? I didn't quite understand. Oh, for the flash loans. Yeah. So basically, what you have to do is write all the logic that handles the trades. So you have to have access to the liquidity. You have to have access to the exchanges that can do the trades. Um, you have to actually find a discrepancy in price. Um, and there actually has to be someone to, like, there has to be liquidity on both sides. It has to be liquidity, the demand for it, and there has to be the liquidity that you can actually like pull out. So you have to have a buyer and a seller. Um, well, you're the buyer slash seller, but you have to have a lending pool essentially that's big enough to do what you want to do. So the real trick with the flash loans, and I'm still learning about these. I mean, this is a brand new concept. Um, the real trick with them is having all the pieces of the puzzle. So you can have the mechanics on how to do it, but the real question is, do you have the real opportunity? Do you have the person willing to make the order that you, or orders that you put, and do you have the pool of funds available to you? And is the discrepancy there? So because this is a brand new thing, if there are other people in the community that have success with this kind of thing, I mean, I welcome others to teach about this because I mean, a lot of stuff with the blockchain. I mean, you can learn about it really quickly, and the trends kind of come really fast. So we're all kind of learning about this, myself included. So Martin says winding tree lift token. So what is that, Martin? Yeah, so market sniffer for bigger differences. So that's also the other trick is being able to find the discrepancies. So you can do that. You can basically build like some sort of service that does it for you. So you could use like Node.js to constantly monitor prices on decentralized exchanges or any protocol. So basically, like that's the crazy thing about blockchain technology that's powered by smart contracts is a lot of times, we have these user-facing apps, but the backends are all like open. It'd be like if you used a website like Facebook, for example, and the back end of Facebook was just like publicly accessible over an API. Well, with some restrictions, but it'd be like if every website had a back end API that was public and you could see all the data that went in and out of it. That's kind of like what the blockchain is and how DeFi works. So there's all this opportunity for developers to go in and like make use of these apps without using the user interfaces. So you could, like talk to all these things and just like pull the information off of it. And here's the crazy thing, like with blockchain, you're not really rate limited uh, like you would be from some other public web APIs. Like, I don't know if you guys ever dealt with, like let's say you built an app that used Facebook, for example. Facebook's not going to let you just sit there and just like constantly consume information. Uh, but blockchain is public, and especially if you run your own node, you don't have those limitations. So you can like always just keep fetching information and doing things with it. So you can always know what the price is. You can subscribe for changes, listen for things. It's pretty crazy. So Jack says he has a sniffer. He used one for Forex, same concept. So Jack, you should show us how to build your sniffer. So while we're here, I want to get your all's input on this. So normally for the blockchain mastery videos, they've been about 30 minutes roughly, like 20 to 40, somewhere in that range. So what I've been thinking about doing is combining that with this time. So basically like doing about 30 minutes of instruction live, like basically doing the blockchain mastery video live with you all. and then, having me 30 to 45 minutes of QA after that. Is that something you're all interested in, or do you prefer doing a separate video that comes out later and then doing the live Q&A just like this? Because the advantage is if I do live Q&A with the instructional time where I'm sharing my screen, I can also, like, people say, hey, how does this work? I can pull up my screen. You can stop and ask questions like while I'm teaching. I don't know if that's something you're interested in, but I could see it providing a lot of value. And then people who don't show up for the live stream also can just access the replay later during the week. I guess the big value there is you get to influence sort of the direction of the weekly video as it's coming out. But I certainly come to that with like what we're going to teach. It's just you get to potentially ask for clarification as I'm teaching it. And then we'll certainly still have this time where we kind of do just back and forth Q&A. Yeah, there'll also be a replay for sure. So there's always replays of these Q&A sessions, just so you all know. It's just sometimes it's confusing to have like a video that comes out every week and then a replay that's also separate. So I think combining them into one might make more sense. All right, so we got a little less than 10 minutes here, guys. If you have any more questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat here. So which DeFi projects am I looking at right now? That's a good question. So like which ones am I just keeping my eye on? Oh, it's for development or for investment. So let's see here. So Luis, are you familiar with DeFiPulse.com? That's a really great place to look. That can help you kind of understand the fundamentals of the blockchain projects themselves and also their volume. So, I mean, DeFi, it crossed $1 billion as far as total value locked into DeFi. That kind of peaked and came down a little bit. That's okay. I mean, I think that kind of mirrors what's happening with the markets. I mean, the cryptocurrency market kind of went up and peaked and came down. Also, the stock market's not doing too hot right now, in case you haven't been watching that either. So let's see here. I mean, as far as the ones that I like to keep my eye on, I know it sounds really basic, but I'm a pretty big fan of Maker and Dai. So those seem to be pretty instrumental, or I could say very important players in the DeFi space. I know there's more other apps that open up like more new possibilities, but I mean, Compound's a pretty good example. Synthetics is pretty cool. Uniswap is pretty cool. I think the Aave protocol is pretty cool, especially now that they implemented their flash loan capability. That being said, that doesn't always correlate with investment value. So I don't really like to give investment advice. I'm not qualified to give investment advice. As always, I try to stick to the tech. But yeah, those are cool projects. But that's the shame, is that like it doesn't necessarily correlate to like what the return on investment is going to be. And that's a big thing that people get wrong, I think, a lot with cryptocurrency speculation and investment. And like I said, not financial advice here. But there's a lot of really cool, awesome projects that are very sophisticated. But it doesn't necessarily mean like their token price is going to go up. Doesn't really exactly work like a stock market does. And that doesn't necessarily even work in the stock market either. But companies who have good fundamentals typically fare better in the stock market. So Winding Tree Lyft tokens a number of airlines. Oh, okay. Awesome. So let's see here. Martin. Let's see. I got about 5 minutes here. If you have more questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat. So is anybody building any personal projects or portfolio projects or production projects that they're proud of or have questions about? Well, if y'all have any projects that you are working on that you want to share your progress with or test out, if you want to get test users, this is a great place to do it. We've had several people talk about their projects inside the coding channel, also on the bootcamp channel, and kind of post them also in the blockchain mastery channel just to get feedback and have people use them. And that's a really cool thing, especially if you're trying to build your portfolio to show an employer is like, hey, I have a blockchain project that actually has some traction. People have used it. It's not just me sitting there using it by myself. Awesome. Yeah. So let us know next week if you have a project that we want to look at. Just going through the crowd sell tutorial because something about CryptoMom pushing for a 3-year ICO friendly period. Oh, I think I know what you're talking about, Louise. Someone was pushing for legislation that basically like people could build projects inside the US, maybe that would be exempt from regulations for 3 years so that they could figure things out. Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know if that's exactly 100% correct. Also, I can't give legal advice. But yeah, I could definitely see people taking advantage of that. All right, 1 minute warning here, guys. If you got any more questions, go ahead and drop them in there. Yes, it's been a good stream. Good questions. Is smart contract auditing very expensive? It can be very expensive. It depends on how complex the smart contracts are. Yeah, it can be very expensive. Live coding Q&A. Yeah, that sounds challenging. Yeah, thanks for your input, Martin. All right, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and wind down. Thanks for having a great live stream today. If you got any more questions, feel free to drop them in the coding channel if it's code related, blockchain mastery, jobs. Just find the right channel for your question, and we'll make sure you get taken care of. All right, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Replay will be posted here in a couple days. Tokens going to mainnet shortly, so stay tuned. All right. See you guys later.